So I was browsing the Steam page for Tactics Ogre Reborn the other day for another video that I'm currently working on, and stumbled across this little factoid of information. Oh, the game only has a 74% positive rating on Steam, and in the last 30 days only has a 61% positive rating? That seems impossible. I mean, Tactics Ogre Reborn is probably one of the best turn-based strategy RPGs of all time, iterating on its past versions to make what I would argue is the best possible version of the game. And yet, if you look at what people are saying on Steam, it's really not great. That blew my mind, and it made me think of another instance where Steam reviews didn't really accurately reflect the state and the quality of a game with Crimson Tactics, which we played a little while back and are still in the process of playing on the channel, and how that game got review bombed to hell and back and possibly killed outright by the fact that people didn't like the fact that the developers were going to have multiple games in the story, and completely disregarding all of the quality that the actual game itself brings to the table, which I can say definitively because, you know, I've actually played it. But many people won't, because they're going to see the Steam review and go, oh, well, clearly it's a bad game. And that's a concept that I feel like is absolutely something that's going to be harmful in the overall scope of people learning about and trying new games, and make it way harder than it needs to be for new games, especially indie games, to take off on the platform. So today, I want to talk about why maybe the almighty Steam review shouldn't be considered to be so almighty, despite its various merits. So let's talk about that. Hello everyone, my name is Tom, otherwise known as Titanium Legman. If you enjoy what I do, you enjoy videos like this that are kind of like a meta look at the state of gaming overall, or my gameplay commentary, my guides, my news coverage, all that type of stuff, a like and a subscription would be very much appreciated. And maybe leave a nice comment down there as well, because I feel like I might be kicking the anthill with this one, and there might wind up being a lot of less than polite comments this time around. We'll see. We'll see. But a little bit of positivity would go a long way, I'm sure. So thank you so much. So yeah, Tactics Ogre Reborn having mostly positive all-time reviews, 74%, and mixed recent reviews, 61%. Let's take a look at what some of those current reviews are, shall we? This one here from Post Hoc Redux, 4.4 hours, posted the 6th of November, so 3 days ago at time of recording. This game is convoluted rubbish. It's a tactical game in format alone, but the excess of information, in tandem with the fact that little of it is visually apparent, means you can never have a broad overview of what is happening beyond the present turn. I know it, and the game knows it, which is why it gives you the option to rewind turns to make up for the foresight it disallows. I mean, this just sounds like someone that hasn't given themselves the opportunity to learn the game, and seems like a little bit of an outlier compared to most people who play it and seem to be able to pick it up pretty easily. But, you know, that's a personal taste thing. It happens. What about this one, though, from Nortrax? Not recommended, 34.4 hours on record. I played the PSP version of this game 3 times over. I spent around 400 hours or more back then. I played this game for around 30 hours and realized it has been destroyed by simple but determining decisions. It is now a horrible game. The fact that random buff and debuff cards can randomly appear through the battlefield makes this a game of chance. Strategy has been thrown out the window now, and players are no longer rewarded for thinking out strategies and building a party with an attack plan in mind. A single enemy or enemy boss that is already buffed can single-handedly 1- or 2-shot your strongest units thanks to these buffs, and you have to resort to debuffing enemies as much as possible and racing to the cards before enemies are able to get to them. This alone is the absolute worst decision that has rendered this game nearly unplayable and a game of chance rather than strategy. This alone is enough reason to stop reading this review and just forget about this game. And this is very reflective of the probably single biggest decisive factor about Tactics Ogre Reborn, in that some people just don't like the buff card system. And I found a lot of those people are old heads who've played the older versions of the game and seem to be unhappy that their old tried and true methods of playing don't work anymore, and that they, dare I say, have to think and come up with new strategies to accommodate to the way the game functions now. And again, personal taste counts for a lot, especially when leaving a review, but at the same time, trying to say that the game is horrible and this is the worst decision that has ever been made for the sake of the game and is unplayable and as a result is a little hyperbolic, and is something that is going to be reflected in most of the not recommended reviews that we see. How about this review, which has a lot to say about the allegories that the game provides and what the game as a remaster is trying to do versus the original version, but it's this particular paragraph here that I want to highlight. In the original game, you were always purposely put into tactically disadvantageous positions because the understanding was that you would be a higher level as a small elite force that was ideologically motivated to erase corruption or change the upper classes from the inside. This game makes it so that you cannot become an elite force that has the experience advantage, even as the enemies have the terrain advantage. So, again, someone having an issue with the fact that, for balance reasons, it was made impossible to overgrind past the levels of the enemy so you can steamroll them, while justifying the fact that they don't like that change through an ideological argument about the functioning of a small elite force with the moral high ground. And so, as a result, you should be able to be physically stronger than your opponent with higher experience levels. Okay. And that's the reason for their negative review. And as you go through, you'll see pretty much all of the negative reviews are like that. And while the majority are still positive, it does start to paint a harsher picture to the layperson looking at the game, potentially wanting to pick it up and seeing these mixed current reviews, when functionally, there's very little to nothing wrong with the game. There's a couple of glitches that we know about, sure, a couple of things that don't function the way that they're supposed to, but by and large, Tactics Ogre Reborn is extremely approachable. I would argue is absolutely the definitive way to play the game, especially with the fully voiced script, the remastered OST, the fact that it's for the first time available on a widely utilized system of consoles like Steam and the Switch, as opposed to just the PSP, or, you know, way back in the day, the Super Nintendo and the PlayStation in, like, Japan only, etc., etc. And yet there are people who are going to try and say, don't even bother with it, because of these weird niche reasons. And that's where the issue with Steam comes into play. The issue with Steam is that anyone can leave a review, right? And a lot of people are going to say, well, that's a good thing because it's one of the only way that the layperson, that a gamer who just wants there to be good games and wants to push back against bad practices in gaming, can actually make their voice heard, can put their opinion out there and try to guide people towards a better decision. And sure, I hear that. You know, you look at things like Overwatch 2, which in terms of how it treats its players is absolutely a terrible game, even if, you know, I'm sure there are still people who play it and enjoy it, would say that it's a good game to play, it's a fun game to play. Overall, Overwatch 2 was a terrible, money-grubbing decision, and we all know it. And as such, it's, what, now I think the worst-reviewed Steam game of all time, or one of the worst-reviewed Steam games of all time. And for good reason. That's people pushing back and showing their dissatisfaction with what that game is. And that's the system working as it should be. You'll have other games that are just broken, buggy releases, like a lot of the AAA games that have come out in the last few years, where people leave very poor reviews because the game just doesn't work right, is not functional, is not a complete product, and thus they review it accordingly. But then you get other situations, right, where something like Tactics Ogre Reborn, which is through and through an excellent game that functions extremely well and is an excellent, enjoyable experience for the vast majority of people who play it. But there are people, especially old heads, who take offense to some of the changes made to the game because it's not the exact same thing as their precious darling that they've played for so many years, which I get as someone who's obsessed over plenty of games in the past, but change is good, guys. You got to let it go a little bit. Let Us Cling Together still exists. You can still cling to it if you want to, but they'll use the Steam review as a bludgeon to try and punish the game for not being what they wanted it to be. And as a result, again, make it look potentially less appealing to those who are curious and wish to check it out. It's the same thing with Crimson Tactics. I've fought this battle a fair bit ever since we started playing it on the channel because from what I've played of it thus far, Crimson Tactics is an excellent game. It's fun, it's engaging, the story is interesting, the character classes and character building are really fun, the music is good, the visuals are good. It's a very, very strong, tactics-inspired indie strategy RPG. There's a reason that I said that it's one of the best turn-based strategy RPGs to come out of the indie scene in recent years, and I stand by that. But so many people either said that they were happy that I put out the information that I did because they went on Steam and saw that it had negative reviews. It's actually gone up. It was like very poorly received, and now it's moved up to mixed. And they were put off at first, so they decided to do some Googling and then saw my gameplay and saw my commentary about it and said, okay, well, maybe I will check this out. And then there's a lot of people who are like, lol, I don't care what you have to say about it. Steam reviews say that it's mixed, so it must be garbage. I'm not going to play this. Stop lying to people. And it's like, you know that Steam reviews are not this almighty God that you hold them up to be, right? And that's where I really first started having this perspective. Like, people put so much stock in Steam reviews, like they're the end-all, be-all of representation of a game's quality, without acknowledging the fact at all that it's just random people leaving reviews positively or negatively for whatever they want, with no actual like metric of any quality to say why they're leaving the review. You can literally just go on a Steam review and say game was great and give it a thumbs down just because you feel like it. Like, that's not that's not what most reviews are going to be, but it's an example of how the system can be very easily abused. So I ask, why do you put so much stock? This is general you, to the audience at large, of course. Or, you know, you personally, if you want to answer this question, by all means, go for it in the comments. But why do you put so much stock in Steam reviews when you can have a game that has the quality that Crimson Tactics does, but it gets review bombed because people don't like the approach that the developers are taking, which they're perfectly allowed to take and is a reasonable approach, but, you know, we've already talked about that at length. Or you have something like Tactics Ogre Reborn, which is a crown jewel in the overall pantheon of turn-based strategy RPGs, and it's currently sitting at recently reviewed mixed on Steam because people don't like the way different systems were changed and they're salty about it. How can we reasonably defend the Steam review as a pillar of a game's quality? I don't think we can. And I think it's time that people take a look at that and actually consider, I need to look at more than just what this review score on Steam says before I consider whether I'm going to buy a game or not. And I imagine that there are plenty of people that do, maybe even the majority. But I've had enough comments and pushback from people recently over just Steam reviews that I felt like I wanted to talk about it, because it's a little disheartening to see people so easily swayed by a community-driven number that can be manipulated by anyone for any reason, right? So I wanted to talk about that, seeing that Tactics Ogre has such a poor review, seeing all the pushback that Crimson Tactics got, and I just want to ask, if you are someone who leaves Steam reviews or looks at Steam reviews, the next time you go to do so, maybe take a little bit more time and put a little bit more consideration into what a game has on offer, and either why you're reviewing it the way that you are, or why other people have rated it the way that they have, and how that may or may not actually be indicative of a game's quality. Because developers out there put way too much time and effort and love and passion into making these games as good as they can be, especially indie devs. To just have it all thrown away on the back of some people who decide that they don't like X, Y, or Z thing that often doesn't have anything to even do with the game itself, and so they're going to leave a negative review, and then that snowballs. I hate to see that happen. I hate to see people's passion and talent and time and effort wasted. You know, you want to talk about whatever the latest AAA live service schlop is that most definitely deserves the poor reviews that it gets. Sure, that's one thing. But there's different sides to the world of gaming. And your indie devs or your small teams doing passion projects to revitalize long-standing cult classics like Tactics Ogre, things like that, they deserve a little bit more consideration and a little bit more care when you're throwing your words at them. So take the time to think about that, and maybe try and have a little bit more of a nuanced conversation with yourself or with the Steam reviews in the future. That said, though, do let me know what you think about all of this and what your opinions are, because, again, I feel like I'm kicking the anthill a little bit with this one. I know there are a lot of people that live and die by the Steam review. So if you are angrily typing out a comment, or if you already have angrily typed out a comment, maybe consider walking it back a little bit. Have a conversation. I'm open to conversations. Everyone have some chats in the comments. I'll be down there too. But try not to put so much stock in something that is completely volatile like this. Yeah? With that said, though, thank you all for listening. My name has been Tom, otherwise known as Titanium Legman. Look out for some other upcoming videos to do with things like, say, Tactics Ogre, and perhaps be around on the 11th for the 1-year anniversary of Tactics Ogre Reborn. We might just be doing something special. Hope to see you all there for that, and I hope that you continue enjoying the channel going forward. I also ask that you all stay safe and healthy out there. Have a good night, and remember, be good to each other. Bye now.